So, a warm welcome to today's TechEd workshop on building an integrated planning scenario with data and analytics solution, in which we will demonstrate you how SAP Data Warehouse Cloud and SAP Analytics Cloud are better together in the specific case of a planning scenario, which is enriched with external data. So my name is Maximilian Gander. I work in product management for SAP Analytics Cloud for planning. I'm not alone here today to guide you through our workshop. Along with me is Antoine CHABERT, dear colleague of mine. Antoine, do you want to introduce yourself?
Hi, everyone. Welcome to our session. I'm similar to Max, part of SAP Inc.'s Cloud product management teams.
Yeah, thank you very much. So Antoine and myself, however, we were by far not the only ones preparing this workshop. There was a big team behind. I want to mention Mirko Link from the Data Warehouse Cloud product management team, of course, Georg Meier from our cross product management team. We had great help from some fellows in our team, Nick, Philip, and Stefan Morio, who supported us in setting up the GitHub and in testing. And then we had a team on the SAP Sales Academy providing us with the workshop infrastructure, the SAP Analytics Cloud and Data Warehouse Cloud tenants, namely Noel Hakan, Ono Bagain, and the entire team. So thanks everyone for making that happen today. So let's now dive into the content of today's workshop. I hope you can see my GitHub screen. Actually, I'm sure you can. In GitHub, this will be our central repository. This will be the guidance for you to follow our workshop flow. Of course, I will go through each and every step in a demo. Antoine will take another part of the demo, but this GitHub repository is then also for you guys if you want to take a look at the content afterwards. Yeah, the systems will be up and running for 2 more weeks until end of this month. So you can always come back and complete the exercises and the workshop at your own pace. So overview, as I already said, we are taking a look at how SAP Analytics Cloud and Data Warehouse Cloud are playing together when it comes to a planning scenario. So how do the two of them exchange data? And we will take a look at a very specific use case, a use case which is unfortunately quite current. So energy prices are exploding around the globe. Companies are worried how this can or might impact their liquidity. So they want to forecast their liquidity. And of course, when energy prices are a factor for the energy expenses, we also want to take into account these energy prices. And for that, we're going to use Data Warehouse Cloud and combine external data on energy prices with financial actuals that we get from S4. And then we bring this data to SAP Analytics Cloud, run an automated predictive forecast on top of the data, and bring the results back to Data Warehouse Cloud in a nutshell. So maybe you saw Jürgen Müller's keynote yesterday for TechEd, and he also explained the scenario, which of course makes us super happy, once again confirms how relevant this is. Talking about requirements now. So in order to follow, you need an SAC and a DWC tenant. We have, as I said, set up an infrastructure for you guys. You can easily register for this. If you had already registered last week for the session overall, you should have received an email with the prerequisite to register for our TechEd tenants. If not, you can do so now. You can use this URL to register for our tenants in this link in our GitHub instruction. Then you fill in the information requested, more or less only your name, your email, your location. This will then determine which tenant you will be assigned to. We have infrastructure in Europe, in APJ, and in Americas, and your company name if you want to. A couple of seconds later, after you submit, you should take a look into your email inbox and look out for this email from our SAP Technical Academy operations team, where you will find the link to both tenants for SAC and DWC, and also your user ID and password. From a prerequisite perspective on tool side, what we recommend is basic proficiency with both SAP Analytics Cloud, modeling and planning, as well as Data Warehouse Cloud. In case you are not so sure whether you meet that, just follow the workshop and then afterwards take a look at the exercises at your own pace. I will show in a second. We also have some material for you to really get you started with the two solutions. One thing to be noted, SAC and DWC perform best with Google Chrome. Yeah, also as a prerequisite or as a piece of advice for you, use Google Chrome and install that on your machine. We'll then go for the different exercises. As I said, we have some material for you to get you started on SAC, to get you started on DWC, OpenSAP courses, community pages, content on developers.sap.com, also a blog post on the bidirectional integration for planning purposes between SAC and DWC, and a Devtoberfest session that Mirko Link and I ran some weeks ago. Support, so we have a Q&A tool in the podcasting platform that you are watching this workshop live on. We also posted some frequently asked questions that we kind of anticipated on the issues tab in GitHub. So here you see, for example, what shall I do if I have issues creating the connections between SAC and DWC, what to consider if performance is low, and then what if I have trouble logging in using the URLs for my registration email. So we are aware, by the way, that end of last week, beginning of this week, for one of the tenants, bad URLs for registration have been sent out. You should have received updated URLs just today before the workshop. But if all of that doesn't help, what you can do is just re-register using the link in the instructions, but with a different email address. So you can use your private email address, for instance. If you use the same email address like the first time, you will not get a new login. Okay, with that said, I guess we can get started with the exercises. So let me set up a little version of GitHub on my second screen and dive into SAP Data Warehouse Cloud, because this is where we will start in a minute. As we can see here on the overview, yeah, I'll just guide you in the first step through the different steps that we're taking as part of the exercises. So we're starting in Data Warehouse Cloud. There we have actual data from S4. S4 is not in scope of this workshop. We will combine it with the energy price influence data for our predictive forecast, which we're getting from the Data Warehouse Cloud Marketplace, which is a place where data providers can share data products that can then be consumed by Data Warehouse Cloud customers. We will combine the data in the union. We will then load this combined data into a planning model in SAP Analytics Cloud as the baseline data and reference data. We will build a predictive scenario on top of that and put that into a planning story in SAP Analytics Cloud. At the very end, we will sync that back into Data Warehouse Cloud, and there you would then be able, in a real-life scenario, to use this combined plan and actual data in corporate reporting scenarios, for instance, or in order to feed other planning processes or for any other downstream processing of the data that you can imagine. Taking a look at the different elements, so what's already there. In Data Warehouse Cloud, we will take a look at the data builder, where we build tables, graphical views, SQL views, data flows, and many more things. What you will find there when we create a new graphical view are so-called shared objects. Let's see if this helps. Yeah, so you will see that we have already pre-created S4 actuals for you, so financial internal data for our company. You will be able to see a table and a view here under the shared objects. And then we will combine this with the data from the data marketplace. You can learn more about the data marketplace here in this description. Afterwards, as I said, we will load the data into SAC to perform planning and then finally write the data back. Important to understand, with regards to this bidirectional integration for planning purposes between SAP and Analytics Cloud, sorry, between SAP Data Warehouse Cloud and SAP Analytics Cloud, is that it is basically based on two APIs. So from Data Warehouse Cloud to SAP Analytics Cloud, for this connection, you use a public API that is that has been published by Data Warehouse Cloud, and which is then consumed with the OData services connection type in SAP Analytics Cloud. And via the data acquisition framework, it's then loaded into the model. And for the other way around, we again use an API, this time published by SAP Analytics Cloud. It's called the Data Export Service. And you can create a connection of the CDI, so SAP Cloud Data Integration Connector in Data Warehouse Cloud, and then either consume the data via a data flow and a table, or if you have a DP, data provisioning agent installed, you can also consume via a remote table. And in this case, you can even consume data from SAP Analytics Cloud in a Delta replication mode. Good. Then, of course, in Data Warehouse Cloud, you can combine the master data, the fact data from your planning scenario with the actuals for combined plan versus actual reporting views. You learn a lot more about the two APIs here, and we also linked a blog post where we announced the interface between the two solutions. So something for you to check afterwards. In SAC, we use a liquidity planning model. You see it is very, very lean. We just have one measure and a handful dimension, a currency dimension, an account dimension with our liquidity line items, and an organizational dimension, which are our legal entities or our company codes. This is the place where we'll then finally load the combined internal and external data. Good. Then we have a story prepared for you in SAC, which you will, at least to some extent, then build up. Some stuff is also already there. And we'll touch on multi-actions, data actions, and predictive scenarios in SAC. And in Data Warehouse Cloud, we will also touch on the graphical view builder and the data integration monitor. So for all these things, you find further information here in these links. Good. Now, let's move on to exercise number 1 and really get started. We start in Data Warehouse Cloud. And the first thing that we see is the start screen of DWC. What we don't want to do in the very first step is to find the external data for energy prices. We do so in the data marketplace. You can go to the landing page of the data marketplace, and then we can search for the energy prices. What you can do is simply search for DA280, which is the session ID for our TechEd tenant, because I specifically uploaded this data product for the subject of our virtual workshop. You could also look for energy prices here. You would also find it. So let's select it. And here we see further details for the product, for the data product, what it covers, other details like the data category, the data provider page. So I called myself as the data provider, TechEd demo here, terms and conditions, etc. And what we now do is we load this data. We see it's for free. Other data products may be subject to a charge. And important for you to know, when you registered with our registration URL, you got the access to the Data Warehouse Cloud tenant. And with that, you also got an own space for you created within DWC. And you will find that here, when you click, you should only see one space, like in my case. So your user ID will be SP12345, whatever. My space is called SP12345_demo, so don't be confused that it looks a bit different than yours. I selected it, and now I say load data product. Okay, and this will now take half a minute or so. We can navigate to the data builder. which is where we will have the next steps of our exercises. And once the deployment is complete for this data, for the tables that were part of this data product, we will be notified by Data Warehouse Cloud. I will pause for a second to give you a chance to follow. Okay, so we see that now this data product has been deployed into my personal space in Data Warehouse Cloud in the data builder. And I see it here. It's called Energy Prices TechEd demo. I could now take a closer look at it, but that's actually not part of the exercise. I see it has a number of columns. Yeah. Also, luckily, we have a company code, version, liquidity item, similar to the model that we have in SAP Analytics Cloud. What we now want to do in the next step is to combine this data with our internal actuals. And you may remember, we have shared these actual views with you, and you will see them when you create a new graphical view under shared objects. So there's a table for you, S4 actuals. And you can simply drag and drop that onto the canvas. And now it's already added as an input for the graphical view. And what we now want to do, as we said, was to add the external data on top of that. And what we do now, look carefully, I just drag it on top. And I now get 3 different options: join, a union, or replace. In this case, I want to have a union. So I just move my cursor on top of the union sign. And voila, it's already mapped. You can now do the same. And I will pause for a couple of seconds. Okay, what we now want to do is to give our view a name, of course. So we can call it Union Actuals and Influencer. When it's a view, for myself, I always have a little naming convention in place. I start the name with a V, so I see it's a view also in the list of artifacts that I have on the data builder landing page. So usually that's quite handy. What we need to do now in order to make that view consumable and loadable to SAC at the later point in time is we mark it as an analytical data set and we expose it for consumption. What you see now is that a little error pops up. It says that we need a measure in place. We don't have that yet. At the moment, it's all attributes. Amount is our measure. And we can just pull that up to the measure area. And now we're good. Every time we create such an object in Data Warehouse Cloud and we want to use it later on, we have to deploy the object, actually. That's pretty easy, of course. Just go here to the top left corner and we say deploy. Save the view with the name we've given it. And now it's deploying when it will let us know once the deployment has been finished successfully. See if that's already the case. No, not yet. Now we're notified it was successful. And with that, we have already completed exercise 1, which was to integrate the external influencer data for our forecast later on into Data Warehouse Cloud and combine it with the shared actuals from S4. Good. In the next step, we now want to connect our SAP Analytics Cloud system to Data Warehouse Cloud in order to load the data from this view. If you want to, you can also have a little data preview here. Yeah, you can mark this, go to the data preview sign, and then you can also see the data which is already here. But that's just a side note. That's not part of the exercise. All right, good. I think almost done here. Just one remark, which I forgot. In some of the tenants, you may see a little yellow warning sign here on the union level. You can ignore that. That was just because of one erroneous data type for one of the attributes, but this will not have a negative effect in the further flow of the session. Okay, so as said, next step, exercise number 2 is to create SAC to this view. And for that, we navigate to SAP Analytics Cloud. I'm on the home screen now. And as I said earlier, what we can use in order to connect the system is an API that the Data Warehouse Cloud offers. We have already done the respective setup on the Data Warehouse Cloud tenants. And in GitHub, let me just share that maybe. Go to exercise 2. You will see what you will find what you need in order to create the connection. So for each of the landscapes, EU10, US10, and AP11. And by the way, you see that in the system URL where you actually assign. So for example, I'm on an EU10 tenant. So I would choose these credentials. If you have US10 in your URL, you will choose these tenants. What you need is, of course, a connection name that you give. Would make sense to just say DA280 underscore your user ID, SP12345, whatever. You need a data service URL. You need to set the right authentication type, an OAuth client ID, and an OAuth secret, and the token and authorization URL of your Data Warehouse Cloud system. Yeah. So please make sure to select the right credentials and information here according to the tenant landscape that you see in the URL of your DWC and SAC systems. It's very important, otherwise you will fail in the next step of the exercise. Good. What we do now in SAP Analytics Cloud is to go to the connection management. Here on the left-hand side, almost at the very bottom, and you create a new connection. And here we select the data source. So as you hopefully know, or maybe know, SAP Analytics Cloud has a lot of connection types for the SAP universe, so to speak, also with live connections. Here, yeah, as I said earlier, we're talking about the bidirectional data transfer for planning processes. So we're replicating data, so acquire data, import data, however you want to call it. And we are using our own data services connection type. So you select that. And now we enter the connection information. So I have a little window here where I can copy all that stuff, calling this DA280 underscore SP12345 demo. That's the name of my user. Don't have to add a description. You don't have to check anything here, not even to connect to an SAP OData service checkbox. It's not required, even though we are using another SAP system to connect to. The data service URL, this is quite interesting and something that we should take a closer look at. So as I said, yeah, look for your tenant ID, choose the right paragraph here in the GitHub documentation, and the data service URL is here. Yeah, so it's linking to the DWC tenant. Then you have API/v1/DWC/consumption/relational/, and then you enter your ID of your DWC space / your analytical data set. So in my case, my space is called SP12345_demo. However, I realized to myself I have to watch out here because the ID is actually demo in all caps, yeah, and it's key sensitive. But I think you will not have the problem because you will just have SP12345, and then you add behind the second slash in my case, V union actuals and influencer. Maybe as per the instruction you have named it exactly the same. So your URL, data service URL would look quite similar. Just have a quick look whether everything looks okay. Then I go on to the authentication type. which is OAuth 2.0 authorization code. And now I get the client ID. So you would get that from GitHub, as I have explained to you. Get the token URL. And the authorization URL. Okay, that looks good. Let's hope that it works, because this is quite error prone, right? When you do copy and pasting, sometimes you have space in between. Looking good so far. Yes, this looks good. So the connection has been created. I can see it here. I hope it worked for you as well. As I said, if it didn't work, then maybe take a moment to reassure yourself that you have selected the right information here according to your URL, and also that you didn't copy any spaces, for instance, or that you didn't forget to copy the first or the last character of the secret or the URL or whatever. Or also here that the data service URL has been maintained correctly. I just give you 30 seconds in order to double check that. All right, and with that, we actually already completed exercise number 2, and we can go ahead to exercise number 3, copy planning model and load the data. So what we will do now, in the early overview of the session, I showed you that we have pre-configured the, we have pre-created an SAP Analytics Cloud planning model for you guys. We will now go ahead and find that in our files, and afterwards everyone will have to copy it, right? Because we cannot all work on the same model, on the same physical model. That would not work. So here we have a folder which is called TechEd 2022 DA280 sample content. You should see that under files, my files /public. Yeah, don't know where you will end up, whether you have to click on public to see it or whether you directly end up in the public folder. What you do now, please, and it's when we talk about copying and about selecting models going forward and selecting stories, please make sure that you carefully follow me or the instructions, because otherwise we will mess up each other's models or the sample model, and this will not end well, I guess. Okay, so please mark the entire folder TechEd 2022 DA280 sample content that you find under the public folder. And now we want to copy it. Here's the copy to icon in the menu bar. Click copy to. And now you are asked where you want to put that. So here, in the public folder, please click on my files so that it's only accessible to you. Nobody else will see it. Yeah, and I think that's the best thing we can do for this workshop, so that everybody, like in DWC, you had your own space. Here you have your own my files. And this is where your stuff is. Yeah? You rename your folder, please. Instead of sample content, you can use your last name or you use your user ID. I don't mind. So I will call my folder now TechEd 2022 _ DA280 _ Gander as per my last name. And I will say OK. So the sample folder had 2 objects inside, which we'll now also find here. The planning model and a story. And those will be the artifacts that you will work on going forward. Please make sure that you copy the folder into the My files, not into public, and make sure that you name your folder accordingly. And going forward, you will only work on the model and the story in this folder with your last name under My files. This is very important. Cannot stress that enough. Good. We will now need the model, because we now want to fill that model with the transactional data that we have combined in the union view in Data Warehouse Cloud, the internal actuals from the S4 system and the external data that we got from the data marketplace for the energy prices that we need for our energy expense forecast later on. So here again, we see the SAP Analytics Cloud data model. As I said, very lean, a version dimension, an account dimension, a time dimension, of course, transaction currency, and our company codes. This is the structure. It's all been created. It's all already there. The master data is already present. You don't have to load any master data or add any master data. Now on the top left, we go to the data management workspace and select this. And now we have the possibility to create an import job. But maybe I'll pause here for a couple of seconds to give you the chance to double check that you are working on the right model in your copied folder under My Files. Okay, now we can add an import job. And we go here, the import icon. We can import data either from a file or data source. Of course, we have a proper connection to a good data source, right? So we select data source. And here again, we have the different connector types that are available in SAC. Kind of pre-filters now the connections that we can select in the next step. I go to OData services, because you remember the connection that we set up as part of exercise 2 was an OData service connection, consuming the DWC consumption API. Now we select the connection that we've previously created, and that was in my case DA280 SP12345_demo. Again, you will look for your own connection that you've created previously and select it. Create a new query is the only option that we have. We leave it as it is, of course, and we say next. And now we get a list of views which is available in this connection. I've seen a question in the Q&A whether you have to create a connection to every DWC artifact. Yes, this is unfortunately the case. We need to create one connection in SAC per view. So we only get one view here, the union of actuals and influencer. Select it and say next. And now we can select which fields you want to import. We could also set some filters on the import, like only select certain entities. But here we just drag the entire thing. Do it again. Take here the top node, union actuals and influencer, and drag it onto the selected data canvas. And we're good. And then we can just say create. Now the system is setting up the data source. So we already get the notification that the import job has been successfully created. And now we can do the mapping, etc. Click on Setup Import. And what we see here now is a preview of the data that we want to load. We see that we have our different fields, like our liquidity items with ID and description. We have the date dimension, transaction currency, etc. Looks good. We just say next. In the next step, we see that quite some things have been already mapped by the system. Yeah, so we're just giving version actual to all line items. This is fine. Liquidity item and liquidity item have been mapped. Transaction currencies have been mapped. Company codes have been mapped, and the amount measure has been mapped. The only thing which has not been mapped so far is the time or date dimension. In order to map it, you can simply take this, drag and drop, and the mapping is completed. Why was that so easy? It's a simplified demo, right? So we made sure that the data sources that we have in Data Warehouse Cloud, that they all match the final SAP Analytics Cloud model at the end, so that we don't have to spend too much time here in this workshop to work on wrangling and mapping, because this is actually not the subject of the workshop. We wanted to focus on the combination of SAP Analytics Cloud and Data Warehouse Cloud and the value you can create from it. Good, mapping done. Nice. Let's say next. We see that there's a couple of columns still not used. So what we can now do is we have the transactional currency dimension in SAC. We see that the ID has already been matched. But yeah, we have the transaction currency description, which we can map as an attribute, or the currency property of the dimension, which we can also map as an attribute here with our amount unit. I do think this is optional, but I just did it. And I'm saying next. And now the system is checking our mapping once again, checking for any issues. But actually we should be all good. Yeah, we see no issues found. And now we can run the import. Now the import is running, taking just a couple of seconds. Again, like earlier with the union, you may have a yellow warning message here for some rejected lines, but you will still have the 4,700 something rows imported. So you can just ignore the warning that was due to to some null values in the DWC net data source. It's not going to have a negative impact going forward in this exercise. Okay, so I will pause for a couple of seconds until you can also finish the mapping and importing process. Okay, so this was already exercise number 3. So now we can already move on to exercise number 4, which is then all around our SAP Analytics Cloud story that we use for reporting and planning data. Again, we can go to our files. Again, please make sure that you are in files, my files, and the folder that you have previously copied, that you are not working on the versions of the story and model in the public folder. Please make sure you copy the folder into your my files and you keep on working there. We have one story here, SAP Finance Liquidity Planning, which is, by the way, almost everything here is based on a standard content from the SAC side, at least, for liquidity forecasting that you find in the business content network of SAP Analytics Cloud. So here you will also find this story, not connected to DWC, but a great use case to do financial forecasting on top of S4 data for sure. So on the first page of the SAP Analytics Cloud story, we see already pre-configured some charts for you. So kind of the actual analysis of the past values for our liquidity data. We see the influencer data for cash out, for instance, with the milk price, the sugar price, and what we're focusing on today, the energy price influencing the energy expenses. We have salary expenses for other expenses, of course, as a very important influencer for the cash inside of the house. We have the sales budget as an influencer also, which is future directed. We now navigate to the second page of the story, and this is where we will actually do our work in the rest of the workshop. And this requires now quite some clicking, so follow carefully. First of all, we go into edit mode. because what we now want to do is add tables to display and manipulate our data later on. So we are now in edit mode, and we can create a table. Just edit here via insert in the toolbar, insert table. We can place it somehow, properly, and make it a bit bigger. And very important, again, something that I want to stress, I will stress a couple of times, so be prepared for that. Change data source and make sure that you select the model from My Files and your copied folder with your last name. Here you find the model again. Do not take the model from the public folder here and the sample content folder. Please navigate to My Files. Just click here and go to the folder which you have copied and named with your last name. And here you find the model, your own model that you can work on without interfering with anybody else. We've changed the data source now. And at the end of the day, maybe I quickly navigate to GitHub to show you what it's supposed to look like at the end. Skip number 3. We are already advanced to our story building exercise. At the end of the day, what we want to see is such a table, with the transactional currencies and accounts in the rows, with our measure, with our versions, and the date dimension in the columns. This is what we're working towards now. So we open the designer panel when we have the story marked. And now we can add additional rows. So we already have the liquidity item. That's good. That's what we wanted to have. In addition, we want to have the transaction currency. I will give a filter for the liquidity item because we have not selected anything with data at the moment. So we are filtering on cash flows related to operating activities, the entire node. Please select that, as well as cash closing and cash opening, if I'm not mistaken. Quite a lot of stuff to remember, but I think this is correct. Yes, it is. We say OK. And this already looks better. However, we want to change the sequence. We want the transaction data to transaction currency to be displayed first for better readability. So we just take it, drag it above the liquidity item, so it will be displayed first. Now you can expand it if you want to. You don't have to. So here we have the energy expenses now. So that already looks quite good. But there's something missing in the columns, and that is the date dimension, because we want to see everything nicely over time horizon. Time, but yeah, time all, that's probably too much, right? Nobody can read that anymore at the end. So we also want to set the filter here on the years 2020, 2021, and 2022. And we say OK. And that already looks quite OK. Just expand 2022. And important to note, and something you should do, simply, let me collapse that, because we actually want to delete all the data that we already have in 2022. It's only 0 values, but this negatively impacts our automated forecast result in the predictive scenario later on. So I'll just mark these 4 cells here on the yearly level. I hit the delete key, and the data is gone. Wonderful. So what we should do in between is to save our story every now and then, in case we, I don't know, accidentally close the tab or whatever. So first table is created, but as we see in GitHub, and as it makes sense for our flow of the session, we want to create a second table as well with our influencer data. So energy, no, here we are, energy prices, of course, yeah. So we go to SAC and we create a second table. Now we could either copy and paste. I'll go via the insert menu and add a second table. make it as big as the first one. Again, I said I'm going to stress it very often, right? We are checking that we have the right data source, existing model. Yes, so this one is the model for my copied folder in my files with my name as a suffix. So I can select that confidently. Again, what we have to do is to set the filter on the liquidity item. This time we want to see our influencers. Say okay. We also want to have our transactional currency again. And our company codes. For better readability. Again, I want to put the transaction currency first. I also want to add the time dimension here. Put the same filter probably as above. You see that we don't see any data. The thing about prices is it's hard to impossible to aggregate them, right? So what we will do to make that better readable is first of all show only leaves in widget so that we don't see the account hierarchy, but only the things with data. So only the leaf members, if you will. You see we have data for the influencers, which we got from Data Warehouse Cloud, Data Marketplace, right? Also future looking. And yeah, so what you could also do here, so we see the energy price already increasing for 2022. You could go ahead now and change this directly in SAP Analytics Cloud. You could select, you could create different versions of the influencer data, and then finally consume that in your predictive scenario as you need it, create a best, worst, middle case, whatever. So actually, yeah, quite flexible what you can do here. So we are done with the story building. I will save my story. And I am then almost about to hand over to my colleague Antoine. I just want to have a brief recap of what we have done so far. And I hope you were more or less able to follow. As I said, the systems are up and running for the next 2 weeks. Maybe you also have own tenants that you can or that you rather want to use. Yeah, and GitHub is also up and running 24/7, right? So we have until now combined in the union the actual data from the shared objects and Data Warehouse Cloud together with the influencer data that we got from the Data Marketplace and Data Warehouse Cloud. We have copied a model and story into our own private files in SAC. We have created the connection between Data Warehouse Cloud and the SAC tenant or this model and loaded the data. And then finally, we have used this data already to display it in a planning story. And now I'm handing over to Antoine. And Antoine, I can be that transparent. I see the chat on the other screen. So I saw your idea of a brief recap. All right, Antoine, I will stop sharing and hand over to you, okay?
Thanks so much, Max. That was really excellent. Yeah, there was some feedback from the audience that maybe the pace is a little bit fast for some of you. So we'll try to really take it step by step. We have some time left, right? So that's something we can do. So before I do that, let me first share my screen in a second. And you can see that familiar SAC. So in a second. So the point where we are left, where we are left with Max is really we have that planning model built in within SAP X Cloud, and we are ready to generate our forecast, right? So what we are going to do next, and this is exercise number 5, is we are going to create a predictive scenario of the type forecasting. What we want to do basically is to take our actuals, combined with the influencers. So basically, we want to create the forecast for the 12 months of 2022. So it's not only about taking the actual and projecting them into the future, it's also taking into account that reality of energy rising a lot currently, especially in Europe, right? So we want to see maybe doing some hypothesis, what is going to be the energy price evolution in 2022, how much that is going to affect our energy expenses. Okay, so that's what we are going to do now. So what you have to do is actually on the left-hand side of SAC, you can expand that navigation and you see the predictive scenarios, right? So let's click on that. And it's going to open the different types of predictive scenarios. So what we want to do here, like I mentioned, is a time series forecast, taking the past actual, the influencer data that is for 2022, past actual up to the end of December 2021, and then generating forecasts for all the months from January to December. So let's do that, right? I click on this time series forecast. And then what I'm going to do in this folder under my file that was created by Max in the flow of the demo, I'm selecting that. And then I'm giving that predictive scenario that I'm just about to create a name. So the name I'm going to give to the predictive scenario, and I hope you can follow and do the same on your end, is going to be predictive liquidity planning. So now I have a name for my predictive scenario. I can just click OK. And now what it's doing is actually opening the predictive scenario and letting me configure the different settings. So I just have a window in front of the settings, which I move now. Easier, right? So first thing is actually where should we take the data as a source, right? The data that we are going to use pass to the predictive scenario to create the predictive forecast. And that is precisely the model we just created, right? So if I go then, and if you go to your My Files, to your folder, you can actually retrieve that planning model. You can click on that, select it, and then the rest of the settings are going to flow. So actually as a source to the predictive, we want to use the information, the actuals, right? So in terms of the planning model, typically these actuals are stored in the actual version. But there could be other version, right? Maybe we do some massaging to the data. Maybe we use a separate version. Any version could do. But here for the exercise, we are going to use actual. Then the second question is, what do we want to forecast, right? And here what we want to forecast are actually the energy expense. We are in this ice cream company, and of course, this company has some energy expense, right? And so that's what we are focusing on. So here we do select the measure. It's an amount, right? A financial amount. But the specific financial account we are looking for is actually the energy. So similar to me, you can search. You will see two elements, right? Energy expenses, and the account we want to forecast. And then the other one is the influencer. How much the energy price in the different currencies express like gigawatt per hour being consumed, how that is going to affect our forecast. So here I select energy expense for now. And then you can see it's detecting already that energy expense that is expressed in different currency. So then I will need to take into account when creating my predictive model, the different currency. The forecast I'm going to do for maybe my division in Europe or in the US or in India, that is not going to be the same. That is not going to be the same currency. We come back to that in a second. Of course, we are doing forecasting. We have a notion of time there. And like I said, we want to forecast 12 months ahead, right? So here we change that one and replace by 12. Then we have this entity field, right? So what does it mean? It means that actually we have different company code, like the different countries I was referring to, and we have also different currencies. And even in one company code, we can have different currencies that are being expressed. So what I'm saying, basically, I'm saying I select the company code, I select the transaction currency. And so what the predictive scenario is going to do is going to generate as many mini predictive model, mini forecasting model as I have company codes, as I have transaction currencies. Of course, I could then use some filters. We are not doing that in the exercise to focus on some of these. Then I just use all my available data that is up to December 2021. Remember, in the story step, we just deleted that information that was there for 2022 that was all zeros, right? And then in terms of energy expense, clearly, if the model would end up with negative expenses, that would not make any sense, right? So we just push on that button from off to on to say, hey, we just want some positive values, right? And if you find negative, you just have to cap that or bring that to 0. Almost there, right? In terms of definition, the last one is that influencer, very important, right? Energy expense is going to be affected by energy price. So we want to take that into account. So the way we are doing it, measure amount, and then count. That is this energy price, gigawatt per hour. Don't forget to click that check, right? That V check to validate, otherwise the influencer is not there. I'm doing that right now, it's there, right? So just a brief recap. Okay, actual version, amount, energy expense, time, 12 forecast, the company code, the transaction currency, all observation, convert negative forecast value to 0 is on, the influencer. I think we're good, right? Let's click trend and forecast. So now what is happening behind the scene is taking the actuals, is taking the influencer value, the different company code, the transaction currency, is creating the different forecasting model. So in a second, in my predictive scenario, I should get an overview of the result, the different forecasting model for the different divisions. So we just give it a couple of seconds and it should be with us in a second. Hey, here we go, coming on my screen. Okay, so let's have a quick look to that, right, to understand what is there. So actually what is there, we have 7 entities. What we mean by entity here is crossing again company code, transaction currency. For instance, that first entity, I'm flying over that, best run Germany or company code and the transaction currency euro. Basically my forecasted energy expense for this combination. On top of the screen, we have this notion of the MAP, mean average percentage error, a statistical indicator that is telling us how well the predictive forecast is doing. Consider that as an average error. When we are forecasting the expenses we had in the past, on average, we have an error of 12%, a little bit more than 12%. So not the perfect forecast by any means, but a very good forecast already. Then you can click on, or I will click on that best run Germany euro to have a look to that briefly, what it looks like. So what do we have here, right? Again, I'm moving a little bit that zoom window so that I can see. Okay, what do we have? We have a stable energy expense. You see the actual light blue, forecast dark blue, stable, a little bit decreasing just before the COVID period. And then suddenly, because of that huge rise in the energy price and something we think will persist in the future, right? So at that stage, we are almost like we were at the end of 2021. Then we see that dramatic increase, right? Dramatic increase of the energy expense, unfortunately, something to be really taking into account for that division of the company. Next thing, we see our forecast for the different months. You can see in December, it's quite higher compared to the rest. And of course, we want to understand a little bit more, what is this model, where is it coming from, right? What does it mean? What has been detected? And in a second, we are able to see that, right? So we see that trend, which was stable in the past. And then, of course, the dramatic impact of the increase of energy price. So that's basically the predictive scenario we have at this stage. And then what we are doing is actually in the next step, which is exercise 5, we are going to create a multi-action, create a data action, and then place that into the story to automate that process. So right now we did it a little bit manually, if you want, starting from the data we have, creating that. But then what we are doing is actually checking how we can automate that process, automate the process in terms of preparing the data to fit the predictive, and automating the process in terms of rerunning the predictive scenario as much as we want with the multi-action. Because basically in this hands-on, we consider we are at the end of 2021. In the reality today, it's November 16. So of course, at the end of November, we would need this maybe 12 forecast again, and soon we will be looking into 2023. So we have to make that somewhat a recurring process. Okay, so we have now the predictive scenario, and in a second we check how we can use it in the multi-action. I'm just taking a quick pause so that you can a little bit catch up if you are late on that, and then we can move on. Okay. So what we do now is, and this is corresponding to the exercise 6, is we are moving to the multi-action section, right? So in the multi-action section, exactly what I was mentioning, we are going to make sure we use a predictive step, or way to automation, or way to rerun on a regular basis the predictive scenario. And then we make sure actually we bring predictive forecast, what we have just seen right now in the predictive scenario, to our planning model, to our story, so that we can expose that to the group of planners we have inside our organization, right? That they can benefit from the forecast, that they can check, compare to their own hypotheses, to the actuals, and ultimately come with the best plan in terms of energy expenses for 2023. In our case, that would be for 2022, but yeah, in the reality of the organization, that would be for 2023. Okay, so here we go. I just click on that. In my case, that was a more button, expanding that, and then this multi-action. So what I'm doing now, I create a new multi-action, right? First, I give it a name. And for the name, in my case, I'm going to use the predictive liquidity forecast. I think you have to add a suffix so that you can recognize later on in the workflow which multi-action is yours compared to others, right? So you can use your last name, you can use the user you have in SAC, right? So I'm going to use a different suffix, going to name it with my name and then the demo. And then we'll probably save it, right? Before I forget. So first thing we want to do, like I was mentioning, is we want to add the predictive step, right? So here we have a number of steps, right? We could do data actions, we could do predictive step, we could do version management, so on and so forth, data import, API steps. So you can see a lot of possibility in terms of automation with this multi-action framework. So in our case, we click on that and we select the predictive step. So we give first a name to the predictive step. Yeah, there is no possible confusion with the other participants because it's actually a step inside your multi-action. So you can safely name it predictive liquidity planning. And then the second step, we are going to look for that predictive scenario we just built in the exercise 5, right? So it should be stored in your My file in the TechEd folder you created. So I'm going to look for that. Hey, here we go. This is the predictive scenario I just created. Inside the predictive scenario, we can have multiple models like experiments, like we are doing in terms of forecasting. In our case, we just have only one. by default, it's named model 1, right? So this is the one you need. And then the text that the corresponding planning model, right, is the one we use as a source to the predictive scenario. I don't need to specify that. Pretty cool. And then a version to save the forecast. So here I don't want, of course, to publish back to actual. I don't want to change my actuals whatsoever. I have a version that is already there, that is a public version, and that is public predictive forecast. That's the one I want, right? I want to store my predictive forecast into a given place. I select that public predictive forecast. Okay, we're all set. Almost there, right? Because at the moment, what we do is actually we bring this data to the predictive forecast version, but we want to go one step more, and we want actually to publish this data to make it really visible to everyone. So for that, we need actually, let me check that, a version management step, right? You have the predictive step there. This is the second step, side to the predictive step. Let me click on that. Version management step. Okay, the step name, I'm looking because sometimes I forget this name, sorry about that. Publish predictive forecasts. Sounds good. The model I need to select here. So I use the model and you use the model actually that is there in the My Files. And then the version, again, that would be predictive forecast. Selecting that and clicking OK. So we're good to go with the multi-action now. What we did basically, we refer to that predictive scenario that is running the forecast. So we can run that through the multi-action. That means we'll be able soon to trigger that from within a story. And then once we have our forecast actually that are available in the forecast version, we then publish that to make it available to the wider group. Save again. This is a good idea, right? Okay, so with that, we are done with the exercise 6. And the next step, what we want to do is now, this is exercise 7 now. So maybe I'm just marking a brief pause, right? That you can switch. Just done with exercise 6. Switching to exercise 7. In the exercise 7, what we do is basically we create a data action to actually blank the predictive forecast. So in case at some point we would need to start from a blank forecast, we are going to create a data action that we can delete the data that is there in that predictive forecast version. And then, of course, in a subsequent step, we can use the multi-action to populate the predictive forecast. So that's the data action we are going to create in the exercise 7. Okay, so I'll move on to that. And to move on, I actually select on the left-hand side this data action. So now it's going to display for me lots of data action in there. I create a new one, right? So similar to the multi-action, first step I need to take, I will give it a name, right? So let's try to make that as explicit as we can. And this is delete predictive forecast. And I add my name. And I add a suffix. Okay, so now I do have the name. Can I save already? No, I need a model. I need actually a planning model, right? Because I want to apply that data action to the data of that planning model. So I think you are familiar with this at that stage. Okay, it's there for me, right? Pretty cool. This is the one we need, right? The one we have from the My Files folder. You should have it in the My File folder. If it doesn't show up, then you can select this other model option and just browse it, find it in the My Files, your TechEd folder. That's what you need. In my case, selecting that and saving before I forget. Okay. So similar to the multi-action, there are different possibilities we have in the data action. The one we are going to use here is the add advanced formula step. Don't be too worried about advanced formula because we are going to create something really simple. So I click on that add advanced formulas step, doing that now. And then, of course, give it a name, right? In the step, delete predictive forecast. No need to add a suffix, right? It's inside my data action. Description, I could do one if I want to be even more explicit. And then what I do is actually I'm looking for that deletion of data, right? So I have it under that plus, clicking there, delete is there, right? Clicking there. So it's actually a very powerful data action. I should not use that on actual. Otherwise, I delete all my actual data. Okay, we do that on predictive forecast, not on actual. We're safe. This is the visual editor. I can change to the script if I'm more into coding. And then I can see, okay, simple instruction, delete. Visual, back to visual. And then I save this data action. Okay, this is already the end of exercise 7. We are progressing. So right now, what do we have, right? Brief recap. Exercise 5, we have the predictive scenario. Exercise 6, we create the multi-action to automate the predictive scenario, to automate the publication of the predictive forecast. Exercise 7, we have the data action if we want to reset the predictive forecast. So the next step, the next logical step is we are getting back to that story that Max was sharing, right? In the story, we have basically our data, actual forecast, and then we have the possibility to add planning triggers. What does it mean, right? It means as a person that is actually the story consumer, the person using the story on the day-to-day basis, the planner, I can just trigger this action. I don't need to go back and forth to predictive scenario, multi-action, data action. My workplace is actually the story. I can trigger all the processes from there. So that's what we are going to do. So yeah, just to make sure I save once again. Okay. So we go back to the story, right? This is exercise 8. We go back to the story. And then what I like a lot is that sometimes the story we just use, manipulated, they show up in the recent file. That is the case here. So this is the story that Max was using, right? We are getting there, right? We are starting the exercise 8. Hope you bear with us. Hope you like the hands-on so far. Let's keep it up once that story is being loaded. And off we go. Okay. So we go back to that liquidity planning tab, right? This is where the action is going to be happening for exercise 8. Loading, so you can see the tables that Max created with the actuals, the deleted 2022 actuals, everything what we need, right? Of course, we are going to change that story, right? So we want to, right now we are in the view mode, and we want to click and change to edit mode, right? From view to edit. Doing that right now. Okay, maybe I publish the data. Now the change into actuals, they are reflected into the data, right? This is something that was not already there for 2022. It's being reloaded, right? So bear with me. Okay, so this is really the action start now, exercise 8, right? Second try. So what we want to do is actually use these planning triggers, right? Planning triggers will help us trigger either data actions or multi-action. So for doing that, you go to Insert, and you have that plus button, and you find the planning trigger with that little play button, right? So first we click on that, and then we integrate the multi-action. So planning trigger, you can see different types of trigger. That could be a data action, multi-action, that could be a BPC planning sequence. Here we want to use this multi-action trigger. So here we have our multi-action trigger, moving that into this gray area to make it a little bit more, fancy. It's not fancy at that stage, but better, let's say. Surprise, surprise, I should give it a name, right, to that trigger, or label, right, something that is more explicit to the story user. Why not saying, for instance, run predictive liquidity forecast? At the end of the day, it's what it does, right? Run predictive liquidity forecast. I think that's a fair name. Can add that to the description or provide more detail. Next, I need to look for my multi-action, right? So my name will not be your name, right? But you have an explicit name that you can find. So my name is that predictive liquidity forecast CHABERT demo. So I'm clicking on that. Okay, it's there. I can save. No parameters available, right? I did not leave it to the planning user to be prompted that they could flexibly select a version. I just set everything to be in predictive forecast. So when the multi-action is running, it's running by default on that version predictive forecast. Okay, he's optimizing the story now. Like we said, second thing we want to do, another planning trigger. Planning trigger number 2, you are going to be a data action trigger. Okay, very much on the right-hand side. Should bring that to the left, right? Okay. Again, better to have a name that can be understood, right? So what is this data action doing? It's actually clearing the predictive forecast. Call it clear predictive forecast. And then I'm going to look in that list. I think I can type if I want to search to be tested, right? In my case, I use this delete predictive forecast CHABERT demo. Select the version you want to run the data action on, right? So here I'm going to say fixed value. So you have another layer of flexibility in terms of prompting or setting the value, setting the version that I'm going to delete the predictive forecast on. Here I'm going to set that to a public predictive forecast. Pretty much set in stone, right? I don't want to give that flexibility to the end users. I can just, copy the description, does not really add to it, just to show the possibilities. I think we're good. Maybe I just save it once again, the story. Maybe I'm going to close that side panel so that you have a better visibility once it's saved. Gives you a little bit of time, right, to if you need to catch up. off we go. Maybe I close that side panel, right? Now we have the full visibility. Okay, so what else can I do? So today I have the influencer data, and at some point I will want to see the forecast as well, right? So maybe we run the different multi-action, the different data action, and then we make sure the predictive forecasts are visible. So I start by, okay, maybe I run this data action first just to show you, right? So clear predictive forecast. So when I click on that, I just click on that play button, right? Can be either in edit mode or in view mode, doesn't really care or matter, sorry. So now what it's doing, as a reminder, I can run in background, or it's pretty fast, right? So it just blank the data on the predictive forecast side of things. So for the next one, maybe I just show you here. Run predictive liquidity forecast. This is running the multi-action. So what it's going to do is actually retraining the predictive scenario like we just saw, and then it's writing back the predictive forecast to that predictive forecast version, and then it's publishing this data into the predictive forecast version, so that at the end of the day, it's visible in my story. So I just click on this run multi-action. Again, I can choose, so maybe because it's doing a little bit of time, I'm saying run in background, right? And there what we can do here, okay, maybe I just wait a little bit that it comes back and then show you one thing at a time. Okay, it's there, right? It was executed. So the process of retraining the predictive scenario, just after I show you what it looks like in the predictive scenario, because you get a message telling you something happened due to the multi-action. But for now, to close this up and actually finish with exercise 8, I go to the table. Yeah. And then what I want to see is not only the actual, right? I want to see the predictive forecast version. Yeah. You see it's booked already, right? It's showing. So we have something in there. Let's see what we have. Ta-da! Our predictive forecast, they are there, right? We have the predictive forecast for 2022, the different energy expenses, right? So we can expand on that. We are just looking at that example of Germany and Euro. Okay. Or that other one, right? Energy expenses. So we can see, for instance, predictive forecast. We don't have so many accounts populated, but here the one that we forecasted on, the energy expense, we get the numbers for 2022. So if we just look for, Swiss franc, this is the currency we have here. So maybe I think what would be missing is maybe the company code. I think it's not there in the exercise, right? But we could add the company code and check. But if we just stick to that transaction currency, we see energy expense. We had a number in 2020 that was 69, then 2021, 81, and then doubled in 2022, right? Exactly that effect that we saw, dramatic rise of energy price, and therefore dramatic rise of energy expenses, right? So that's pretty much the end of exercise 8. We have reached that point where basically building on what we had before, building on that planning model with the data, integrated the influencer data, the actual data, everything integrated from Data Warehouse Cloud to SAP Cloud into a planning model. On top of that planning model, we created a predictive scenario to forecast. Then we automated that running of the predictive scenario with multi-action, plus added some data actions to actually take care of the data as much as we want, right? Second part I should do briefly. clear predictive forecasts. If I would want, right? Yeah, then I would have to run it again. That's okay, it's running. So again, if we would refresh, now it's clear, and then we can restart the process, right? Run predictive liquidity forecast. It's really the last mile of the hands-on, right? Just exercise 9 is left with Max. Give it over to Max in a second. Then we go back to your question. I'm sure there are many. So I run that guy in the background. I just save the story while it's running. And then just want to show you what it looks like now in the predictive scenario, right? Multi-action has executed in the meantime. Now I'm speeding a little bit, right? Sorry, doing multiple things at the same time. That's okay. Bear with me. Go back, publish, of course. Oh. Okay, let's see. Come back to that in a second. So thing I wanted to show you in the predictive scenario is actually the following, right? We have our predictive model there. This is the one we just created, right? The predictive scenario. And then, for instance, here, we have that notification without us doing anything. That predictive model was retrained at the moment. The last moment, actually, we executed that multi-action. Okay. Coming back to that strange message and making sure we have the forecast in there that we can use in the next step of the exercise, right? Maybe I did too many things at the same time. Let's see. Okay, we're good. Predictive forecast still there, 2022. Okay, I think we are set up for the next step, Max. Bringing this back to DWC. Bring this back to DWC.
Bring it home, huh?
Okay, bring it home.
Yeah, does not only apply for our TechEd, for the web of our TechEd workshop, right? Also applies for the forecasting data that we want to have in Data Warehouse Cloud. It's like the single source of truth for the steering relevant data of our company. So I'm sharing. Just give me a second. I have to make sure that I share the correct window. Here we go. Okay. Share. Okay. You see reloading SAP Analytics Cloud page. So I'm picking up right where Antoine has left off. So we will see the SAP Analytics Cloud story with the data in a second. But actually what we are doing now is directly going to Data Warehouse Cloud, setting up the connection to SAP Analytics Cloud and loading the data. So we start in Data Warehouse Cloud. And if you want to, you can also, because I will go back to GitHub in a second, you can also directly go to the connections. You will not have to select a space like I did because you only have one space, most probably. You can already go ahead, create a connection and follow the GitHub instructions. While I again elaborate on the OAuth client and URL details that you will need to use in the next step. So similarly to our exercise number 2, when we create to Data Warehouse Cloud to SAP Analytics Cloud, we have again already created an OAuth client in SAP Analytics Cloud. And in GitHub, we have provided you with all the details that you need for the setup of the connection. In this case, the extraction of the SAC data to your data warehouse cloud space. Again, you will have to check on which tenant landscape you are on via the URL of your SAC or DWC. tenant. You have done that before, so you know how this works. This time it's a bit more simpler because we're not using authorization code, but client credentials. So there's one URL less that we need to copy over later on. So let's now go into Data Warehouse Cloud. The first thing that we do there is to create a new connection. So you have gone to connections, been directed to your space directly. Most probably, if not, you just select your space with the SP12345, whatever your user ID is. We already see one connection which was automatically created during exercise 1. I haven't showed you that, but also when you load data marketplace artifacts, you get connections created. So this was the case here. We now create a new one, different kind of connection, right? And what we are looking for is the cloud data integration connection type. We select it, and now we can go through the exercise and filling all the necessary information. So first of all, we again need a URL, like we back in exercise 2 needed a data service URL. Here for the SAP Analytics Cloud Data Export Service API that we are using to extract the data into Data Warehouse Cloud, we also have a certain URL format. You see it here in GitHub. Pretty straightforward, since the CDI connector, unlike the OData connector in SAC, is able to handle a catalog service. We don't have to specify the exact model in SAC directly here. We have one generic address that we can put into this URL form window, whatever you want to call it. So I'm using one for my specific tenant. You, of course, take the one from GitHub. OAuth 2.0 is fine. OAuth grant type client credentials, as I said earlier, is also what we're going for. Here, this exercise, we need the OAuth token endpoint that you take from GitHub. Just have to make sure that I don't copy any blank spaces or anything. Again, this is the biggest risk when doing this. I take the client ID and I take the client secret. So something to be noted here. You can, as I said, I think in the very beginning, you can extract data from SAP Analytics Cloud in two ways. So you can either use remote tables. For that, you need a data provisioning agent, or you can use data flows in the data builder, which then load the data from SAC into a table. This does not require a DP agent, which is also the reason why we are doing it like that for this workshop, so that everybody with any kind of setup with or without DP agent on own tenants is not limited with regards to the following of exercise number 9. There's one big advantage if you have a DP agent though, and you use remote tables. You can enable real-time data replication in that case. It's not real-time, but close to real-time. Every couple of minutes, the data will be retracted from SAC then, and it will be done in the Delta mode. So every couple of minutes, data will be replicated from SAC to DWC, just the latest changed, added or deleted or whatever records. And that's pretty cool. This is something that we have deployed now with QRC4 2022. As I said, in this exercise, we go ahead without a DP agent, and we will build a data flow in a table in the next step. So I hope that was sufficient time for you to enter your credentials and the URLs. Now we go to next step. And what we only have to do now here is to add a name for our connection. Let me just quickly check what kind of guidance we gave here in the exercise so that I can comply with that, of course. However, the connections are specific to your space. So you can give it any name that you want, actually. Yeah, so I'll just call it SAC TechEd DA280. Giving it a business name, I don't need that now. And I will create a connection. what we already see here, connection created successfully. It is worthwhile to validate the connection now, because earlier today in our testing, I found out later that they had something wrongly maintained. And then I was sent back to the connection management to validate. So I validated and everything looked good, as the message here confirmed. Otherwise, I would have gotten error message not authorized or whatever. So now what we want to do, as I said earlier, build a data flow to get the data into DWC. And where do we find the data flows? Again, like earlier today, we've been here before, we go to the data builder interface. And here we have the new data flow option. Clicking on it, and it looks pretty similar to what we've seen before, right? But this time, we're not going via this primary repository here. We're going to the sources, where we'll see a list of the connections that we also see in the connection area of our space, the screen we've just seen two steps before, right? We open the connections, and we should now be able to see the connection that we've newly created. We also see the one to the data marketplace from earlier, but this time we want to use the SAC DWC TechEd DA280. We see SAC namespace, and now we're getting a list, expanding that, of all the models that are available in SAP Analytics Cloud in the connected tenant that our connection refers to. So there's a trick to find the right model here. So you can use the search function, of course, which is pretty straightforward, not necessarily a magic trick, but you guys will have many models on your tenants with similar names, right? So what you may want to do is navigate to SAC, go to Files, go to My Files, to your personal folder, and open the model. And here you will be able to find the model ID. For me, it's kind of hard to copy that because what you don't see, I have the zoom control in front of that. So I'll just copy the entire URL to a notepad and then just take the model ID. So the model ID is what you will probably see here. So the alphanumerical code at the end of the URL, you can copy that. And what I would advise you to do now is to just paste this into the search, and you will only find one model now. Yeah? This is your model. You can expand that, and you now see a list of available data. So the master data for the different dimensions, as well as the fact data. We are now interested in the fact data. What you can do is click on the fact data. Like earlier today, simply drag and drop onto the canvas. And it's there. Okay, now we're getting an error. What does it say? The operator fact data has unconnected input output. That's expected. So we're building a data flow, and the data flow always loads the data, at least in our case, loads the data from the source, which is the fact data view in SAC, into a data warehouse cloud table. But we can very easily add a table here. We just click add table. Now we can give the table a name. We'll just call it, yeah, as I said earlier, T underscore liquidity effects or something like that. Okay, so that's done. Now we get another error. Also, this is expected. So we have now created a new table, but it's not saved and deployed yet. And we need to save and deploy it in order to use it going forward. But the cool thing is we mark it so that we're now on the table level, and we can directly say create and deploy. Okay, so when we now look into the table, we see that we have the dimensions from our SAC model. We have the master data, not the master data, sorry, the measure. So everything everything looks quite good, and all the mappings between the data flow and the table, of course, that have been automatically done by the Data Warehouse Cloud system. So we don't really have to take care of anything here. Okay, then in the last step, just click somewhere on the canvas, and now we're back on the data flow level. We can give this a name, call it df_liquidity facts. Oh, it's nice that the technical name is auto-generated when I enter a business name. Saves me some work. Okay, and what I want to do now, of course, is always create such a new artifact in Data Warehouse Cloud, is deploy that. While this is deploying, let's quickly recap what we have done so far. As part of exercise 9, we have created a connection using the connection details as provided in GitHub, a CDI connection type. We have gone to the data builder, created a new data flow, simply looked up the available sources under the connections on the sources tab. We have searched for our model using the end of the model URL in SAP Analytics Cloud so that we could find it easily. We have dragged the fact data from here onto the canvas, added a table, gave it a name, deployed it, gave a name to the data flow, and we have deployed it. And what we can now do, of course, because we're done with building the data flow already, we can run the data flow to actually do the extraction of the data from SAC to DWC. Okay, so up here we have the run button, little play button. We click it, and now the data flow run has started. And while the system is working in the background, we can actually check what it's doing. In order to do so, we go to the data integration monitor, which is another module here on the menu shell on the left-hand side in SAP in Data Warehouse Cloud, data integration monitor. Already in the right space. And we see that we have different monitors for the different connection types, if you will, that are able to feed data into Data Warehouse Cloud. So a remote table monitor, a view persistency monitor, the data flow monitor, remote query, task train monitor, everything's available here for monitoring. We have built a data flow, as you are aware. So we go to the data flow monitor page, and we see that data flow liquidity facts, it's already completed. I talk too much. So nevertheless, you see we have started the task. Then we see all the different substeps that the system performed. And yeah, within less than 1 minute, I guess, we had the run already completed, and it extracted all the data from the SAC model into our Data Warehouse Cloud table via the data flow. That's cool, of course. And now we're getting to the very last step of our workshop. I think we're doing pretty well timing-wise. We want to take a preview at the data. We do that via the data builder again. We go back to the data flow we've just created. Just click on it. Click on the table and the preview icon. So again, data flow that we've previously created. Just click on the table, click on the preview icon, and we see that actuals, we see that transactional data has been loaded from SAC to Data Warehouse Cloud. And with that, I guess we pretty much closed the loop from SAP Analytics Cloud to Data Warehouse Cloud. We have basically done it all right. We have added the data for energy prices into DWC, combined it with existing data, loaded it to SAC, did all the magic there, and brought back our forecasting results of the automated forecast to Data Warehouse Cloud. Okay, So now I guess it's sufficient time to take a look at common questions that have come up in the Q&A or before doing so. I want to say, usually, of course, the last step that we did in our exercise would not be the last step in a real life scenario, right? You would now use this data combine it with the updated actuals, of course, in Data Warehouse Cloud, to have your joint views that you then do live reporting in SAC on. Yeah, or you would use the data, your financial forecast data, in order to feed another planning process, for instance, combine data from different planning processes for corporate reporting purposes. So this is already something that we see many customers doing already today in Data Warehouse Cloud. Okay, so now let's take a look at our Q&A panel, and maybe Antoine, you can fill me in.
Yeah,
is there anything?
I can. Yeah, so I think you had a great answer, Max, on one of the questions, but I was not too sure. So the question from the participant was in terms of the recording. Where will it be available? I think you answered and confirmed that it would be on the TechEd website, right? So they can probably refer to that session that we have, DA280, and at some point they would see the recording there. Is that your understanding?
That is my understanding, yes.
Okay.
Exactly.
Cool. Okay, a lot of questions coming, so I'm trying to get into that. Will there be an NFT code for the session? I have no idea. I'm sorry about that. Would you know on that? I think there was a lot of focus on NFTs this year and maybe tied to sessions, but I must confess I have no idea if we have one for our session.
Me neither, I have to admit.
Okay. Maybe we get back to the product question. So there was a question on can non-SAP Data Warehouse access SAC data using which methods, live or replication? Are there licensing implications? I think that relates to that notion of similar to what we have used of that API and the exchange we can do between SAC and possibly other systems. Was the question clear?
No, can you repeat it? Sorry.
Sorry, you missed that. Okay, so basically here we show an exchange between DWC as the data warehouse solution from SAP and SAC, right? Back and forth using this OData API. I think the question from the participant is, can you do the same with non-SAP data warehouse systems, right?
Mm-hmm.
Other than Data Warehouse Cloud with that generic OData API.
Why would you do that? No, just kidding. Of course, the data export service that we offer for SAP Analytics Cloud that we have used in the last step, which is also Delta enabled since Q4, this is very generic, and you can use it to extract data to any other third-party system as well. Yeah, so this is open. Then, of course, the other side of the house is the loading of data from the data warehouse, whatever data warehouse database to SAP Analytics Cloud. So for that, I think we have generic connection types in place in SAC. For example, the OData service that we also use today. We also have a SQL connection available for data import. As far as I am aware, we are also working on a new model import API, similar to the export API, which is on the roadmap for 2023, currently planned at the moment. Yeah, so I think there would be means to do it. Yeah. However, I want to reiterate the capabilities that you get when you combine SAC and DWC. So on the reporting side, we already offer live reporting. We will enhance the experience for live reporting in the very near future, so that it will be easy for you to select a data warehouse cloud model as the data source within a story, just like it was an SAC model. You will see the DWC spaces listed next to the files and models in SAC. So this will be a very seamless experience. And I've seen a couple of questions coming in terms of, data replication was done twice in this demo. Can we do it live? Not yet. but it is on our roadmap. And I would say from a development perspective for our planning teams, it is the highest priority at the moment. We want to achieve it, that we can plan live on data in Data Warehouse Cloud. We will be able to deploy our models into planning models into DWC, so that the data then actually only resides in DWC, and every time you publish something, you change something, the data is available live in reporting, and you will have to do less replication in the future. So this is future direction. Don't want to promise any dates here, but if you embark with us on that journey of SAC and DWC coming together, you will see they are already better together, and they will, I think, become the best power couple in the market for analytics and planning. I don't know if anybody else will offer anything similar.
Makes a lot of sense. I'm trying to catch up with the flow of questions. There was a question, can you please show again union table and view DWC? Or recording would be appreciated. I think the best is to actually refer to that recording, like we mentioned.
Yes.
I think there was a question from Arjinder. Is data overwritten every time is moved from SAC to DWC? So I think it's about that loop back, right, that we show at the end, exercise 9.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. So my recommendation here would actually be to work with a system setup, including a DP agent, so that you can then use a remote table and real-time replication, and then you will only always get the delta transferred over to DWC. Otherwise, at the moment, it's a full load. Yeah.
Just checking the list of questions. I think we are doing pretty good. I mean, we have 7 minutes to go, right? Can keep the question coming. The next question I see is one from Sanoj. Can we connect this SAC to EDL like Databricks? Not sure about that term, EDL, sorry.
EDL like data, I'm also not sure. So you can check on our help page the connection types that we have. As I said, we have generic connections to our data and SQL databases, so it's either covers it or not.
So I think, okay, just, okay. Question from David. Do you recommend using DWC over HANA Cloud? I think this is being answered. So from my standpoint, the solutions are not really the same, right? Depends what you want to do. HANA Cloud as a database, Data Warehouse Cloud as a or go-to solution for, data integration, data messaging, data orchestration, right? So it's a little bit comparing a different solution and different scope, right? Don't know if you want to complete on that perspective, Max, from SAP Cloud, in particular planning standpoint.
DWC and HANA Cloud, basically, yeah. So we are aware of both use cases. So we also have customers already running HANA Cloud is the primary database, with some at the end also native warehouse. I don't know if you can call it. I mean, Data Warehouse Cloud and warehousing is not necessarily my home turf. I'm more of a planning guy, but we see these use cases. I think the first priority for us will be to integrate with Data Warehouse Cloud. But as I said, we are aware of these use cases, and it's a customer journey, if you will, that we also have in mind to be enabled, so that you can bring your own HANA Cloud to live planning in the future. Yeah, as I said, I cannot commit to anything, but be assured that it's on the radar.
Peter has a great question, right? Just close to the end of the session. There are planning features in many SAP products. Is there some kind of central paper comparing, contrasting them so that we can best determine which solution makes the most sense?
Yep.
So of course, maybe we can focus the answer on what's actually the sweet spot of SAP Cloud Planning compared to other solutions, and then if you want to elaborate. I can complete as well, right? I'm not only asking question, right? I can also give answer.
If you want to, I can give my point of view. So I don't know if we have a central paper available. We definitely have this clarity internally, and I think if you reach out to your customer success partner or whoever your SAP contact is, you hopefully will be able to get these answers. with SAP Analytics Cloud, we want to enable extended planning and analysis. That's our strategy. So not just financial planning, even though also today we saw a financial planning use case. But maybe also, it's also good thing to say, yeah, right? So this is the story that we have seen today in SAC is based on business content on S4HANA. We also have further S4HANA content packages. We have operational workforce planning on top of SuccessFactors, which replaced the SuccessFactors workforce planning recently. So we're moving into one direction. Of course, there's also SAP integrated business planning, which is a great supply chain focused solution. And for us, it's very important that SAC is a platform, yeah, which serves for XP&A, but integrates with the specialists like IBP. And integration is key, right? So that's my point of view.
Makes a lot of sense. Okay, I think we have most of the question covered. So technical question, maybe without DP agents, delta loads, do we have to every time drop DWC table if data from SAC to DWC is full load? Wow, quite precise. Can you repeat if
yes,
that's not
so
clear enough?
As I said, it's a full load. Yeah.
Yeah.
I guess you want to process your data then downstream. So yeah, check for your own use case with an architecture makes sense, right? And also store different versions of the data or whatever. I think that has to be evaluated for every use case.
Okay, so maybe there was non-SAP warehouse. Okay, so sorry, Ashish, I thought that was the same question, but it's actually a different question. So the question is, can SAC pull data from non-SAP data warehouse, right? So the question before was the other way around.
Yeah, but I think we answered it for both ways.
Yeah,
so
we're good?
We should be good, yeah. Good, so it's close to 9:30 Central European time. We know we must end on time. So Antoine, I guess it's what's left for us is to say thank you for many participants, for many great questions. So as said, the system's up and running for 2 more weeks. So just keep going and follow the exercises, and you can raise questions via the issues tab in GitHub, as I have showed you in the very beginning. So goodbye from my side. Antoine, closing words from your side.
Yeah, I think that was a great experience, right? Very pleased to see the feedback, the positive feedback in the chat too, right? So nothing to add than big thank you to everyone in the call.
Thank you.